All right, welcome to tonight's workshop. I'm going to share, I got to hit the share button here. You're going to share my slides with you. So you should see my screen now, my presentation. This is the workshop, The Truth About Plantar Fasciitis and Foot Pain. So as I was saying, some of you signed on a little bit earlier. If you do have questions, comments, anything, you can hit that chat button and I'll do my best. I don't have anyone helping me here. Michelle says she's not getting any sound. I'm going to type a message and say, others are. Maybe you have your speakers muted. I'm assuming you all can still hear me. So if you have any questions at all, just reach out and I'll do my best to do it in real time. If not, I'll get you afterwards. I'm going to give you my contact information. If you do want to reach out, the emails that you got after registering, you can send those, reply to those. Those go to Tassie, but Tassie gets them to me too. So you can reach out that way if you want to as well. Let's start with this. Why in the world would you want to listen to me? That's a really good question. So let me just tell you a little bit about who I am. I'm a physical therapist, and I've been so since 1996. This is an outdated slide. I think it's going to be 28 years, the end of this year anyway. If I do the math right, actually almost 29. Goodness gracious. I'm a proud graduate of the University of Iowa's physical therapy education program. It's an excellent program that prepared me really well, and it's preparing my son really well now too. I'm proud that he's going to be entering the workforce as a physical therapist in about a year as well. I went on to get my doctorate in physical therapy through a group out of Louisville, Kentucky about 12 years ago. And I've been with this company called Kinetic Edge Physical Therapy now for 24 years this summer. That was a little bit after the company was founded. It was founded in 1998. Again, I haven't looked at my slides recently. I apologize. We now have 9 clinics in central and south central Iowa and lots of different PTs. What you're going to learn tonight are things to some degree that I learned during my education, but a lot of it is things that I've seen in working with so many people over a long period of time with this issue, and things that I've learned from my colleagues in our practice too. And I think it's important. One of the things we're going to talk a little bit about is real functional movement. Okay, there's a time to do some exercises on a table. There's a time to use hands-on stuff, and that's all well and good. But ultimately, your body needs to move between gravity and the ground. That's three-dimensional movement. So we do a lot of movement analysis and help people learn how to interact well with their environment in true functional positions. And so that's a really critical piece that I think sometimes gets missed. I want to ask you to use that chat button right now, and you can answer all 3 of these questions if you want. The first question is the most important one. Is there a specific activity that you do that's likely to make you feel your foot or plantar fascia pain? So if you would write that down, then if you want to answer the other questions, how bad does it get on the 1 to 10 scale? And how long have you experienced it? You can just say weeks, months, years, whatever. Those last 2 questions don't tell me whether I can help you, but it might have some impact on how long it takes to get benefit. If it's higher pain that's been around for a longer period of time, the process has evolved over a longer period of time. You're going to learn a little bit tonight about what we call cumulative trauma. And the higher the pain is, the longer you've experienced it, the more cumulative issues are likely at play. So it takes a little bit longer to get benefit. However, the big question is that first question, and some people are responding now. So let's see. Getting out of bed in the morning, Joy says, and that is one I think many of you are probably going to agree with. Um, First steps. Sometimes it's out of bed in the morning. Sometimes it's just after sitting down for a while and then getting up and moving. Over a year, she said, and it gets up to a 7. So good job. Thank you, Joy, for that. Renee says walking. That's what Allison says too. Jamie says, I'm not sure if I have plantar fasciitis. Well, we're going to talk about that and some other things tonight, Jamie, and maybe by the end of tonight, you'll know this. Renee says getting out of bed in the morning. When I go for walks in the morning, says Deb, and the pain gets to be about 5. First steps, walking, says Gina. Renee says a pain of 4. Not sure if it's plantars, says Arliss, but foot pain after walking more than 6,000 steps. There you go. Wearing sandals in Mexico, says Pam. Pain at a 7 since 2012. There you go. So a lot of this, most of you are saying walking and weight-bearing activities, and that is not really surprising because you can see it right here. And I want to tell you that this is a good way to know if you're in the right place. Some people will say, well, this doesn't make sense. But I'm going to tell you, it's actually in some perverted way good if you have pain that's reproducible, because we know that if your pain is reproducible, it's also reducible. If it's brought on by something that tells us that there are mechanical issues at play. And we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about what that means in a little bit. But let me just tell you this first. Let's say it's a beautiful day, spring day. You got your favorite car, a convertible, and you're driving on a Sunday afternoon drive, and then that light goes on in the dashboard. So what do you do when you see that light? Well, honestly, if you're something like me, you probably say, dumb light, it's on again, not reliable, it's nothing, I don't feel anything, see anything, hear anything, smell anything, nothing's wrong. So we ignore it. That's pretty typical. Now, let's say you keep driving and then you're starting to feel a rattle in the engine compartment, and maybe you start to smell something, see a little smoke. Then, of course, you're smart enough to say, I better pull off on the side of the road here. But would this be the right thing to do? Imagine you pop the hood. Imagine I'm doing this. I pop the hood, but I also pop the trunk. And I walk to the back of the car first because I know in that trunk I've got this really thick blanket. And I'm going to take that blanket from the back and I'm going to bring it to the front and I'm going to set it on that engine compartment. And I'm going to slam the hood back down again. That's going to muffle that sound. It's going to keep the smoke in there. I see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, right? All those symptoms of the problem are gone. It's gone, right? No, that's not how it works. That's a mechanical issue with your car. And you know that you've got to look at the mechanics of that car, get a mechanic to look at that to make sure it goes away again. So when I say if your pain is reproducible, it's kind of good news because it's mechanical. That means we can also do something to reduce it. Now, the thing that reproduces foot pain in most cases are weight bearing activities. So I was reading your mind already, walking, first steps after periods of sitting, being on your feet for long periods of time. Those weight bearing activities are the hardest things for people. Now, I told you about this word called cumulative trauma. Let's start with trauma as a word in and of itself, though. If you hear the word trauma, what immediately comes to mind? Now, if you're like most people, they're going to be thinking significant issues like a motor vehicle accident or falling and fracturing a bone, those big significant issues. And that definitely is trauma. But if we graft acute trauma, that's actually acute trauma. If we graft that, it looks like this: sudden tissue damage. And then over time, maybe weeks, months or so, it gets a little bit less severe until it gets below the symptom threshold and we don't feel it anymore. With many acute traumatic incidents, that's eventually what occurs. Now, the amount of time it takes to get below that symptom threshold will be determined to some degree by how significant the mechanical trauma is. That is acute trauma. We see this in our clinics all the time, but the most common type of trauma, the one that we see much more often, isn't acute trauma, it's cumulative trauma, and that looks like this. Now, this arrow slowly going up only takes a few seconds on my screen here, but that literally could be months or years in developing. And you can see at the start, okay, it's below the symptom threshold. So changes are occurring in our tissues that we're not even aware of. And then once it gets just above that symptom threshold, most people will say, it's not bad. It's just a little achy. I can deal with it. I don't want to be a squeaky wheel. It's going to go away. And maybe temporarily it will for a little while. But if we ignore what's going on and don't really do anything to truly get to the root of the issue, it is prone and likely to come back and get worse over time. So when we see this going up and up and up above that symptom threshold, the severity of the issue with regard to frequency, intensity, and duration is going up. Now, why do I have these buckets on here? That's a great question. I'm kind of a visual learner, so maybe this will help you too. Cumulative trauma, though it is kind of slow, gradual, and insidious, is actually pretty predictable in how it behaves. Um, I'm a physical therapist. I'm 53 years old now. Does that make you feel old, Arliss? You've known me for a long time. Uh, Being a physical therapist is not physically demanding. It's certainly not, labor like being in a manufacturing environment. It's not terribly hard. But I will tell you, at the end of the week, as a 53-year-old physical therapist, I'm more tired than I was half a lifetime ago when I was a young physical therapist. That's the reality. When our bodies change over time, we all know this. We're not meant to last forever. No one has escaped time. And so when we start to experience some fatigue, we say, well, that makes sense. I'm no spring chicken anymore, right? So pretend that's a little bit of water filling the bucket. And we excuse that. We make excuses for it. We kind of ignore it. We just try to, pull up our bootstraps and take care of business. And more water fills our bucket. And when that water gets a little bit higher, the symptom of fatigue becomes a little bit more significant in many cases. The next step is discomfort. And the best words I can think of to describe discomfort are a little stiff and sore, right? It takes a little bit longer to get warmed up and going. If we do something we're not accustomed to, we're more likely to feel a little bit of aching and pain. It's not terrible pain. It's just kind of mild, right? And again, because it's not substantial and because we're human, we like to just make excuses for that and continue to go about our tasks. Try to just put it in the back of our minds. But more water fills the bucket, and discomfort eventually, in many cases, gives way to more significant levels of pain. And then the next step, when we start to have an overflow at the top of that bucket, it's no longer just pain, but we have true tissue injury. Okay. So our goal is to get to the end of our lives, the end of our working careers, with a bigger gap between the top of our bucket and the top of our water. And so what we're going to talk about tonight are ways that we can grow the bucket or open up the valve to let a little water out of the bucket so that we don't have this spillage occurring. That is the goal. Here's another good analogy. See this railroad track here? Look in the distance. If you look carefully at the top of the screen, you will see coming around the bend is a train itself. Now imagine 2 or 3 minutes ago, before you can even see this train, you're just walking on the tracks, and you're going to eventually start to notice some changes occurring, warning you that there might be some pending danger. Mild, small issues, maybe a little rattle of the tracks, maybe in the very distance, you can hear the whistle blowing of that train. And as that train gets closer and closer to you, those symptoms, the things that you can hear and observe and feel, get more significant. This is cumulative trauma. Frequency, intensity, and duration of your symptoms will become more substantial the closer you are to having this overflow occurring. And unfortunately, when we hurt a little bit more, specifically when we hurt in our weight-bearing joints, of which your feet are some of them, we don't move as much. And so what we're going to talk about tonight is important to help you move well, move as often as you possibly can, because when we move less, it's not just bad for our musculoskeletal health, it's bad for our overall health. I don't even know if I have this on here. I don't. I believe the statistic is we spend 86% of our healthcare dollars in America on six things. And number one, easily, in fact, number one, the costs for musculoskeletal issues is more than numbers 2 and 3 combined. And 2 and 3 are heart disease and cancer. Numbers 4, 5, and 6 are diabetes, obesity, and depression. Those six issues account for 86% of our healthcare dollars in America. 5 out of those six issues, musculoskeletal issues, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, and depression, are affected and impacted to some degree by how well and how often we move. So we're talking about things that are not just important for your musculoskeletal health, but for your general health. My goal is that you don't have to do medications, injections, surgeries, things that might give you a temporary symptom benefit, but don't get to the root of the problem, but also to keep you moving so you can maintain or get a return of your overall physical health much better than you have right now. Now, I've already alluded to this before, but the single biggest mistake that people make when they are faced with a problem is we tend to ignore it. This is the human condition. Okay, so sometimes I'm doing this at my home. I live in a home that was built in 1915. We moved into it in 2015 when it was 100 years old. And we had the insurance company come over to observe it and make sure that we could get this covered. They said, no problem, we'll cover you. Here's the deal. You got to get you got to get those shingles changed. They are old and they need some repair. And I looked at the roof and I said, that's a pretty big roof. and I just bought this house, which wasn't a small investment. And I looked up on my ceiling and said, you know what? Doesn't look too bad. So I ignored that problem. Now, I'm not going to make up a story. Several years later, I got it fixed and there was nothing substantial that happened. But if I continued to ignore it, I was rolling the dice. And eventually, if I ignored it too long, a bigger condition was going to exist that ultimately would have been more costly than just replacing the shingles. But this is what people do when we're faced with an ache or a pain that we can excuse and not have too bad of conditions. You know what? It'll probably get better, right? Lots of people don't like to go see doctors or physical therapists. So let's just hope it goes away. And like I said, sometimes it does for a little while, but eventually it does tend to come back because this is a cumulative mechanical issue. Unfortunately, the next step is, and I know you guys aren't there because you're listening to me tonight. So you're not ignoring it anymore. You're ready to do something about it. Unfortunately, the next step that most people do are simply treatments that alter it. And I'm apologizing on behalf of physical therapists and other medical providers all over the place. Most of the things that we actually do to help these things don't really get to the root of the problem. It just alters it, it masks it. Um, Medications, injections, and surgeries do not get to the root of the problem. They just mask the symptoms. Even some of the treatments we do in the physical therapy clinic, ultrasound and electrical stimulation, they can make you feel better, but they're not taking this mechanical stress off the tissue. So don't hear what I'm not saying. It's okay to do some of those things, but they are not complete. They are not solutions. They are symptom reducers. And so I'm challenging you tonight with this. Get to the root of the problem. If you take away the root of the problem, we will solve it. We're going to talk about what those roots are. In order to understand this, you have to understand this key point. We like to treat these musculoskeletal issues like they're medical problems. And ironically, they're not. They're mechanical issues. Remember the analogy that I talked about? You know, if you pick up your pant leg and take a look at the side of your ankle or foot, there's not going to be a dial on there that says, oh, look at that. I just need some more ibuprofen. I need to get my ibuprofen meter up there and I'll be just fine. Again, that might make us feel a little bit better, but it doesn't really solve the problem. You can't manage a biomechanical issue with a biochemistry treatment. It's not going to get to the root of the problem. These are movement-based issues that need movement-based solutions. We need to see this sign and symptom as a warning sign. The warning light that's coming on the car that I talked about a little bit ago as well. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds with this, but I want you to understand this. When we hear that we have an inflamed tissue or something is experiencing inflammation, what is the natural response to that? We're kind of conditioned in Western medicine to say, oh, I can take an anti-inflammatory. I know ibuprofen will do that, or a prescription, a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory. There's prescription medications for that. Well, I want you to understand that inflammation is a natural part of healing. And if you experience tissue damage, there are 4 stages. And stage 2, from day 3 to about the end of week 3, is the inflammation stage. And this is critical to help the body prepare to develop vasculature during the healing process. And that vasculature that starts to develop during the inflammation process will strengthen during the proliferation and eventually become fully mature. And you'll be left, if this process is brought to completion, with a tissue that gets nutrients a lot more substantially because we've developed the matrix of vascularization to feed that tissue. So an anti-inflammatory, I don't know that I even have it on here, I don't, but C.S. Lewis is my favorite author. Maybe some of you know of him. It's been many decades ago since he was even living. He wrote many books. In fact, one of the quotes that I am fond of came from an essay that he wrote during World War II. I think it was entitled Miracles. And I don't remember the exact, I'm paraphrasing here, but he says, the miracle is not in the medicine. When he's talking about true treatments of conditions, he says, true treatment does one of 2 things, or both. It either removes something that is inhibiting the body from doing what it's naturally designed to do, or it facilitates the body's ability to do what it was naturally designed to do. So with that lens, an anti-inflammatory, does it reduce something that inhibits the body's natural functions? No, it does not do that. Does it encourage the body's natural function? No, it actually blocks the body's natural functions. So again, don't hear what I'm not saying. It's not like we should never take ibuprofen, but I will definitely be going to my deathbed on this one. We default to the anti-inflammatories way too quickly, which can, in reality, stunt or minimize the healing process, which makes it more likely it's going to come back again. So ultimately, we need to get to the root of the problem. Now, before we talk about the major culprits with regard to foot and plantar fascia pain issues, let me tell you a real story about a client of mine from about a while ago, over 10 years ago, Heather. At the time, Heather was about 38, very healthy and active individual. She exercised often. I think she did CrossFit with her husband. They got on a trip to Hawaii and did lots of hiking, including in sandals on mountain, the dried mountain lava. Not easy terrains to walk on. And she kind of started to develop some foot and heel pain. And when she got back home, she thought, well, maybe this will get better. She's a teacher. She stood most of the day. She was very active trying to do CrossFit and just kind of kept staying there and gradually getting worse. And she'd done what most people do. She ignored it for a while, couldn't do that, went and saw the doctor, got some medications, temporary benefit. It came back. She went and saw a specialist, got an injection, a steroid injection. That's an anti-inflammatory in that area. She gave it some relative rest, but she tried to stay active. And ultimately, it was getting worse over time. And she came to me somewhat skeptically, but a little bit desperately. And I want you to understand, we'll talk about this in a little bit, this plantar fasciitis, and in most cases is not an appropriate name. Fasciitis means inflammation of the fascia. Well, it might start out as an inflammatory issue, but if it's been experienced over and over again over time, it morphs over time from an inflammatory problem to a tissue pathology. That tissue can handle tension stress as well as it ought to, as well as it used to. And so it more easily breaks down. And if we treated it like it was primarily a foot issue, we might have been able to make her feel a little bit better for a while with the right treatments and massages and that kind of stuff. But really, her issue was a hip problem. And I'll tell you what that specific issue for her was in a little bit. As we do this, though, we're going to talk about the most common types of foot pain, but you need to understand how bodies are designed to move. Your spine, for example, this is a great way of understanding three-dimensional movement. Your spine flexes and extends. That's movement in the sagittal plane. The spine will side bend left and right. That's movement in the frontal plane. And your spine rotates left and right, movement in the transverse plane. Your foot is really unique in that there's a bunch of bones and there's changing angles to the foot, but really your ability to pronate the foot and then propel yourself, use it as a propeller to drive yourself from one foot to the other as you walk, requires that foot to load and unload three-dimensionally. And so pronation, when that foot drops, is when the foot bones kind of unlock and they become mobile and ability to adapt to the surface underneath it. And then as soon as the heel lifts, it locked up, becomes a rigid lever that we can use for propulsion. So I think this video is going to work. This is just a computer rendition of what happens at the foot. What you are going to notice, I think you can see my cursor here, maybe. Hopefully you can, but you can see this arch between the orange and the blue bones there, okay? As soon as that heel hits the ground and that calcaneus will move outward, it's called eversion, you'll notice that arch drops. Now, in this arch is where that fascia exists. So there's going to be some natural tension on that fascia. And the fascia is designed to absorb that force to some degree, unless it gets overloaded. That's really the critical thing. Every body part is designed to handle some stress, but when it is experiencing more stress than it ought to for a long enough period of time, that's when cumulative damage occurs. Remember, little by little, progressively worsen, water filling the bucket, and those symptoms become more frequent, more intense, and longer in duration. So watch this. You'll see it from several angles, and I'll try to walk you through it. It's pretty easy to see. I think we start looking at it from the side view. This is when the heel strikes the ground and that arch drops. And you can just imagine that fascia underneath there, like a trampoline, absorbing some of that. Now, when this lifts, the heel lifts, arch pops, and that's when it becomes that rigid lever. Here's an oblique view. That arch will drop right there. putting a little bit load on that fascia. When the heel lifts, you'll see that arch pop back up and it becomes a rigid lever, and you can propel yourself on that rigid foot. Here's the front view. You'll see that calcaneus evert really nicely there, and that's what causes the body working over it. The saddle of your talus kind of drops down and in, and then when the heel lifts, it stiffens up again. That's the normal foot function. We want your foot to do that. That's good if it can. Oh, shoot, I didn't mean to do that. There we go. That's again. Oh, shoot. Oh, there we go. I love it. Okay. Now, there are things, though, that can happen that reduce the foot's ability to do what it is designed to do. Part of it is the environment that we put it in. So on the left, there's the right and left foot of a person barefoot. And that looks quite a bit different than the same bird's eye view of a person in high heels. So if we were in person, I'd ask you, what do you see that's different? I can't do that, but everything is squished together a little bit more. Obviously, with the high heel, that toe gets pushed down into the front of the foot just a little bit more, and the front of the shoe a little bit more. Now you start to see these greater angles to the toe. That can lead to the development of one of the things that we're going to talk about here in a little bit, a bunion. How well do you think a foot that's getting shoved down that direction can become a mobile adapter? Proning, not great. Okay, it's kind of stuck in this position. It's always kind of rigid. So um, I get questions, and I think maybe some of you even reached out. What are the right shoes for this? Here's the deal. Jesus didn't have shoes. He had sandals, probably made of leather that he strapped to his foot. People in that time didn't have perfect arch supports and all the technology that we put into shoes. They had feet that function. Now, I'm sure they had some foot pain from time to time. But my goal is to enable you to develop the capacity of your foot to be able to handle different kinds of shoes. Now, high heels would not be my recommendation. Ideally, and this foot even has some changes, the one on the left that's barefoot, straight angulation through the ray of the foot all the way through the toe. Feet actually should be wider. I should actually put a picture of a healthy foot on here. I don't have that on here. Let's talk first about the three types of foot pain: bunions, plantar fasciitis, and Achilles tendonitis. Please note that when we talk about the types of foot pain, I'm just kind of describing it or talking about diagnoses. We're not yet talking about the cause. We'll talk about causes in a little bit here. But first of all, bunions. I think everyone understands what a bunion is. They know what a bunionized foot looks like. Typically, this foot not only has a funny angle, but that great toe, which is supposed to extend 60 or 70 degrees, usually gets really stiff. It cannot extend, which means we can't even load that arch very well. So the foot can't be a good rigid lever. It can't even unlock very well to load that plantar fascia that much. It's problematic. And I see a lot of people post bunionectomy to work on developing foot function again. And the other interesting thing is the bunion can be caused by other issues, which we'll cause a little talk about in a little bit, including the same thing that Heather experienced, which was some hip-related issues. Now let's talk about plantar fasciitis, or more appropriately, fasciopathy. You can see in this picture here the circled part. The artist put it in red. If you microscopically looked at that part of the heel, that arch in that area, the plantar fascia, as it connects to the heel, you would probably see little tears in there, micro failures that create an inflammatory response, which of course is going to be a little achy and sore. It's the body's warning sign that you better be careful about how much stress you're putting on that tissue. People with this almost always have that first of morning pain or after periods of rest. That's really, really typical with this. Now, as I said before, if it's your first time experiencing this, it's probably an itis, an active initial inflammation of that tissue. If you've had it over and over again, more than 12 to 16 weeks, it's probably not an inflammatory issue anymore. That tissue at this point is becoming pathological, where it tries to heal, gets broken up again, tries to heal, gets broken up again. And as time goes by, that tissue requires less and less tension to create a micro failure response. My point is this: treating it like an inflammatory condition doesn't make that tissue stronger. The treatment that you do has to make that tissue tougher and more tolerant to tension stress. Otherwise, you're just reducing pain temporarily. The interesting thing about Achilles tendonitis, which is on the back side of the heel, the Achilles tendon is different than the plantar fascia. They're different, they're connective tissues, but they're different. But the actual microfailure process is really similar. It's just the microfailure now is occurring on the back of the heel in the Achilles tendon instead of underneath the heel at the plantar fascia. And these people often still have pain with initial steps. It's just that it's going to be in the posterior heel. And most people with both Achilles tendonitis and plantar fasciitis will say, well, once I get going a little bit, I feel fine. But if I walk too much towards the end of the day, if I've been on my feet a long period of time, it's going to start to hurt again. Okay. So those are the most common types of foot pain. There are definitely others. And I will tell you this, even though we're highlighting the top three, almost all of them are influenced by the same mechanical stresses. And so these causes, even if you're not experiencing one of these three primary types of foot pain, probably still apply to your condition. Okay. Now, when I talk about the true cause, what we're really talking about is a culprit. Now, understand this. As I told you, the spine and the foot and everything else moves three-dimensionally, three planes. Okay. Each of those parts needs to be able to have the correct amount of movement. Okay. If you have a joint or a tissue that's way too mobile and not stable enough, that's a problem. Okay. It's not in the happy middle. It's on one end of the spectrum or the other. Or the other side of it is a tissue or a joint that's way too stable and not mobile enough. That's not good as well. We need to have a balance at all of our moving parts between mobility and stability. I call that mostability. Okay. And in your world, with regard to foot pain, the things that I'm always interested in, the primary culprits are above the foot are your hips, even higher than that, your mid to upper back, believe it or not. And we're going to look at the ankle and foot itself. Okay. We talk a lot about Goldilocks in our clinic. Not too hot, not too cold, not too soft, not too hard. Goldilocks liked it just right. When we look at all the length in your chain of movement from your foot to your knee to your ankle to, or sorry, foot to knee to hip to spine and so on, every part needs to have a balance, a just right Goldilocks amount of mobility and stability. And if you have too little motion or way too much motion in a link in your chain, it's usually the closest neighbors that suffer the most with that. So the hips are easily the most common culprit of foot pain, but the hips closest neighbors are the knees below and the lower back above. So if you have knee and lower back issues too, in addition to your foot issues, you got to look at that hip. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit here. Let's talk about those hips. Hips can be problematic if they have way too much stability or way too much mobility. They're not Goldilocks just right. Let's take a look at, first of all, your hip flexors. Okay. These are muscles, pretty major muscles. They start at the lower back, lumbar spine region, and your pelvis. Now, think about the way that we position ourselves today compared to a few generations ago. We sit at desks, in computers, in cars, and other vehicles. Because of technological advancements and ergonomic changes, we are sedentary in a hip flex position much more today than we used to be a few generations ago. And we're in a hip flexed position. Those hip flexor muscles are shortened a long period of time. So if you're sitting and those muscles are short, muscles tend to adapt to the positions we typically put them in. So as soon as you stand up and that hip extends, we put tension on those muscles. What does that do? Well, it's probably going to pull your lumbar spine forward a little bit, or maybe your pelvis gets pulled forward. That changes what's happening above that area. It's going to put stress on your lumbar spine. It's going to put stress in your knee. It's going to change the way you're bearing weight. And the first thing that hits the ground is your foot in weight bearing position. So your hips are a critical component to your foot function and therefore your foot health. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. Uh-oh. I'm going to waste a little time here because for some reason I'm having some issues with this thing moving. It's probably going to break out of it in a little bit. Are y'all doing okay? I might have to continue without having slides here if this isn't working here shortly. But let me tell you about this. This was Heather's issue, okay? She had weakness in her hips. And so when her foot hit the ground, the arch would drop more than it ought to. There was compensation happening at the foot because she couldn't stabilize well through her hip. Okay. I'm going to stop the share here, folks. I think this will work. So I apologize for that. Not sure what's going on with the computer right now, but it's still happening. I'm just going to close the program. Technology is great when it works. Okay. So Heather's issue was not that she had too stiff hips, but she definitely had too mobile a hip. She needed some hip strengthening. So the solution for her was to build her hip strength so that when she landed, she could absorb that force through her hips better, which caused her to load her arch much less significantly. I think part of the issue is my battery's getting a little bit low, but I think it's going to last for now. Okay. Okay, now what about if you go higher up in the thoracic spine? So, um, if you can, do me a favor. I want you to stand up right now. Stand on your feet. If you can listen to me and do this. So, what I want you to do is I want you in your mind's eye to feel the arch of your right foot. Okay? While you are standing on both feet, 50-50, what I want you to do is to rotate your spine as far as you can to the left and then rotate as far as you can to the right. When you rotate to the left, the arch of your right foot should drop a little bit. You'll feel, if you had a grape underneath the arch of your foot, you'll feel that arch squish that grape a little bit. When you rotate to the right, that arch will lift a little bit. It will take pressure off the arch of your foot. So your thoracic spine has impact on movement all the way down to your foot. That's it. Okay. So do this for a moment. You can sit down if you want to. In fact, I'm going to tell you to just slouch. Okay. Slouch like mad. You don't hear therapists say that much. But while you're slouched, I want you to try to rotate your spine left and right. It's hard to do. But if you sit up nice and tall, you'll find that suddenly you can rotate really well. If you lack mobility, and when we do things with our hands and our eyes, the shoulders start to round a little bit. We get tight through the thoracic spine. When you look at this balance between mobility and stability in the thoracic spine, it is extremely rare to have too much mobility in the thoracic spine, but it's very common to have not much mobility in the thoracic spine. Lack of mobility in the thoracic spine causes neighboring areas to have to make compensations. So the closest neighbors to your thoracic spine are your low back and your neck and shoulder. So if you have issues at the low back and shoulder and foot, thoracic spine might be an issue. It definitely has an impact on what's happening as you load your foot when your first foot hits the ground. Same thing's true with the arch itself. Sometimes people have flat arches, either because that's the way they're designed or it's been acquired over time. Other people have really high arches. You've probably seen the thing where you walk with wet feet on concrete. How much your foot do you see? Is it a flat foot or is it a high arch with that? So there are some people that just have structural foot issues. In most cases, though, these are acquired changes to what's happening in the foot, and most people with foot dysfunctions, it's really a hip issue again. So it kind of highlights the importance of the hip. I'm going to try to open this back up again and see if the plantar fasciitis one will work. If so, I'll start it back up again. I think it's going to. Okay, we got it. So let me go back here. We'll be able to close out this way. Go back to share. Good. So the bottom line is, folks, if you've had foot pain issues, if they're not brand new, it's probably a mechanical pathological tissue issue. The tissue cannot handle that tension stress as well as it used to. And if you've sought treatments, but you've not had someone look at how your hips function, how your thoracic spine functions, how your ankle itself functions, and recognize that it has to manipulate the body between gravity and the ground. Oftentimes, the foot picks up the slack when you have movement dysfunction, too much or too little movement at those key issues. And when those tissues are asked to operate outside of their design threshold for a long enough period of time, progressive cumulative changes occur. So it will not be surprising for you to hear me say this. If you want to eliminate the pain once and for all, or at least manage it much more significantly, you have to find and fix the root cause. And the most common treatments, unfortunately, do not get to the root of the issue. I've got the five most common. We've talked about medications, injections, and surgeries. Orthotics are known to have a 50% success rate, but it is mechanically, artificially propping up the foot. And sometimes in cases, this is necessary. But again, it's kind of like anti-inflammatories. Sometimes we too quickly rush to orthotic support. And if we recognize that most foot issues are a result of poor hip function, and we've not looked at the hips to try to correct that, placing this foot in an environment with external support, the natural question should be, what does that do to what's happening above the chain at the knee and the hip itself? It may not be the best thing, okay? Walking boot is sometimes necessary to take some acute stress off it, but it definitely changes the way your ankle and your hip mobility works too. So true treatment says, what is your problem? We individualize the treatment based upon your movement dysfunction. Why is your foot picking up the slack? Which tissue or tissues, which joint or joints need to move better to have this balance between mobility and stability? You cannot do this in a vacuum. You have to recognize that the whole body moves as a dynamic system between gravity and the ground. And what we would treat you or teach you to do is empowering and educational, because your body changes based upon the stresses that we apply upon it. And that's my job as a physical therapist, is to apply the right kind of stress at the right time to get the body to adapt and change. The right stress is good and helps the body change effectively and appropriately. And that is a process that changes as time goes by. So there are not the top 4 exercises for foot pain. There's the top 4 exercises today, and 2 weeks later that changes because your body starts to change. It's illegal for us to work with people in groups, but it's not effective. It needs to be one-on-one. And while I often use my hands, there are specific treatments that we do that are very, very focused on the foot itself. It's really important to use the hands in real functional environments where when you're working between gravity and the ground with true movements and exercises, especially with arch-related pain, sometimes also with Achilles-related issues. There is a treatment called A-stem where we mobilize the tissue. Those are the tools you can see on the picture here. That does facilitate the body's remodeling response. I'll spare you the scientific details on this, but that can help that tissue become more tolerant to tension stress, or it's a true remodeling effect of that issue. That is really important. And the training that we do is called eccentric training to help the tissue handle and get stronger with this functional loading as well. All right, folks. Hopefully that you felt like this information was important, and you probably nodded your head a few times. But we haven't solved all the world's problems. We know there are still some problems. You're never going to remember all these things. And secondly, and more importantly, you know what can cause it, but you don't know what's causing it in your body. And though we're fond of saying that knowledge and power, I'm here to say tonight that knowledge does nothing for you unless you can put it into practice. You have to be able to implement it. So what I want to offer to you is this foot pain relief consultation. What is that? It's pretty simple. It's 20 minutes with one of our foot pain experts. We'll ask questions and let you talk a little bit, and we'll do a brief analysis of your thoracic spine, your hip, your foot itself in a very short period of time. We can probably tell you what type of pain you're experiencing, what are the primary causes of that, the root causes of that, and what a process of making it better would look like. And ultimately give you a little bit of direction and hope as well. Now, there is a value to that time in the open market. That'd be $150. Because you spend a little time with me tonight and give me that, it's a gift to you. We want to offer that to you for free. No strings attached and no high pressure sales tactics. It's trying to give you answers with this. I'd love to be able to do a money back guarantee, but I'm not taking any money from you. So I'm telling you that if you do this, we would and find out and that the experience was not worth your time, just speak up. we'll give $150 to the charity of your choice. I'm proud, though, that we've never had to do this in this case because it is really valuable. And at the very least, you have a written summary of findings that you know what your issue is, and when you're ready to act upon it, you can. So here's what I'm going to ask of you. If you are interested in this, there's a QR code that you can put your phone on if you want to. The easiest thing is just to click on that chat and say, I want in. I didn't put it on this slide, but if you do want in, if you want to spend 20 minutes for free with one of our foot pain experts, you need to click on that chat and say, I'm in, but then you also need to tell us where you want to be seen. So we have clinics at Ames, in Des Moines, in Colfax, and Newton. We're headquartered in Pella. We're also in Oskaloosa, Albia, and Centerville. And so if you're signing up here tonight, I'm going to go to the chat. I see some coming through already. You got to tell me that you're in and what clinic you want to be seen. And by the way, I promised I'd give you my contact information. This is the cell phone. It gets directly to me. You're welcome to call me, text me, whatever works for you. The emails that you get, you can respond to. They will get to me, but this is my direct email, troyvm@kineticedgepT.com. Reach out if I have not answered your questions. I know there have been several coming through tonight. We had over 30 people on our call tonight. Okay, so here we go. Let's see if I'm getting everyone. Gonna go up a little bit here. Wow, good job, guys. So I'm gonna go down little by little. If you've typed your in, Andrea wants in, maybe you've told me where. Joe wants Oski, Centerville for Brittany. Andrea wants Pella. Good job. Let's see, SREIS, I think you said that was Cheryl and Pella. Okay, that's great. Missy. Oh man, there's so many of them here. Here we go. This is going to work a little bit better. Goodness gracious, here we go. Catching up. Missy's in Pella. Gina, Des Moines. Arliss and Pella, I knew that. Renee, online. Okay, Renee, we can get you going online. Jeannie, you gave us your email address. We'll reach out that way. Terry wants to be seen in Newton, Jamie, and Ames. All right, you already know our group there. They're a good group. Lisa and Oskaloosa, Joy. Are you already going to our Pella site, Joy? If so, you can talk to your therapist there and they can go through this. That's awesome. Or if you're going to somewhere else, we'd still love to see you in Pella and do that free screen. Either way, I'll have them reach out to you. Allison lives in Nebraska. Allison, maybe I can talk to you on the phone at some point so I can reach out to you that way. That might work well. Or where it depends where you are in Nebraska, Allison. I know lots of people and people that look at the world the same way. They could probably help you too. So if you want to tell me that, that's good. Roxanne and Oski, Jeannie in Des Moines. Gosh, you're doing great. Pam, you're in Pella. That's awesome. Newton for Deb. Ames for that 515 number. Can you put your first name that way? Although we might be able to cross-reference that. That would be good. Daryl or Darrell in Oskaloosa. Pam at the Pella Clinic. Jamie, good job. Jamie is online. Allison online. Okay, Joy. Yeah, you're welcome to come work with one of our people. I'll have them call you on that too. Another one out of state, Rosamond, Edgerton, of course. That makes sense too. Did you know Elise, one of our occupational therapists that grew up in Edgerton, Minnesota? There you go. And then already working with James and Katie in Des Moines. That's awesome, Jeannie. You'll get good information from them. All right. If you did not respond yet, um, that's just fine. I'm going to stop the share here. You will get another email from us. If you haven't respond, if you put your in your chat that you want to be seen, that's great. We will get a hold of you. You don't need to respond, but on the email you're going to get, there's a link to sign up for a free screen too. So if you didn't do it tonight, you change your mind, you can do it that way. You'll have a link to this recording tonight, so that's great. And also, if you could do me a favor, I'd appreciate this. If you know people that are dealing with foot pain, send them that link. Let them follow us. As a young therapist, I wasn't as bold, but I've seen way too many waste a lot of time and money on things that do not get to the root of the problem. I want to reach those people, and so we're happy to help them too. So, all right, 515, we got you as K at AIM. That's great. Thank you very much. So anyway, if you want to pass that on, that's great. I do appreciate your time tonight. I know that your time is precious, and you gave some of it to me tonight, so I appreciate that. Thank you for being interactive as well. I apologize I couldn't get to everything, but do reach out to me. At the very least, even if you don't take advantage of this free screen or choose to do any physical therapy after that, that's fine. But if you have issues, I want to be a resource for you. So you have my contact information. Please, it's not a bother. I'm happy to counsel you as best I can. And sometimes we're not the right answer, and it's better for you to go elsewhere. And we will encourage that too. So if that's the case, we'll certainly recommend that. So I'll be a resource for you, even if it's not a foot related issue, all kinds of musculoskeletal issues. So don't hesitate to reach out. We want to be your musculoskeletal experts and answer any questions that you have for that. Appreciate it, the time you gave me again tonight, folks. And I wish you blessings. And I hope that you do find the solution to your problem. And I want to say this too: it's not like we do something and it goes away immediately. And in many cases, it's a matter of managing it well. So, for example, if you're a person that's been dealing with pain for 4 years and you've got 7 out of 10 pain, what would it be like for you to have at the worst 3 out of 10 pain, and sometimes you're not experiencing pain at all? We can't always get rid of every pain entirely, but if you take mechanical stress off tissues, they function better and they feel better. So usually pain frequency, intensity, and duration goes down with that. I think that's a really achievable promise that can be met. So, so I'll give that same promise to you. Appreciate you all. Have a great night and a wonderful spring. We'll all see you soon. Bye bye.